what it does mean is that it is logically possible for God and evil to coexist at the same time.
Yeah, well,
Okay, so this is really interesting, Andreas. I'm so glad that you asked it. So I'm sitting here in Oxford by God's grace. There's no reason this former drug addict should be sitting here. Um, but C.S. Lewis used to live here, and this is where he wrote Chronicles of Narnia and a bunch of other really fantastic books that I wholeheartedly encourage your viewers to read. And he says in one of his books, it's critically important that we examine the assumptions within a question. And assumptions are things that we just assume to be correct or true. And so it's the same thing when we're thinking about the problem of evil. As I laid it out, there are hidden assumptions, which Christian thinkers like Alvin Plantinga, Peter von Inwagen, Richard Swinburne, my favorite Eleanor Stump, and others have illuminated. And so in the philosophy of religion literature, the problem that I presented, the logical problem of evil, is considered a defeated problem. And by that, they mean both atheists and believers in God alike agree that the problem of evil, as I laid it out, isn't as sound of an argument as they once supposed it was. And they defeated it by identifying those hidden assumptions. And so there are lots of hidden assumptions within the problem of evil. But here are just two, just to kind of like get you thinking in that sort of way. And the first one is this. The first hidden assumption is that since God is all powerful, then he can just create any world he wants. Like, for example, a world without evil and suffering and injustice and all those sorts of things. And the Christian response seems to be, well, not necessarily. So love is what makes life worth living. And love is the aim of God's creation. We see that on page 1 of the Bible. And for love to exist, freedom is required. And if we are free, then evil, injustice, suffering are all possibilities. And the Bible's response to why, evil, suffering, and injustice exist is because human beings have exercised their free will to go against God or to rebel against God. And so some people will ask or push back and they'll say, well, couldn't God have chosen a world where human beings only freely choose to do good instead of evil? And the answer, the very quick answer, seems to be no, not necessarily. Because, well, what sort of human beings would they be if they could only choose to do good? And it seems that they would be some sort of AI, some sort of heavenly celestial algorithm fueling them, or robots or puppets or something like that, but not truly human. To be truly human, it seems that they need to be free in order to experience and express love, which is God's chief aim, meaningfully. So that's the first assumption. The second assumption is equally important. So the second assumption is that isn't it impossible for an all-loving God to have a moral or good reason for allowing suffering? And the problem with that is that it is an impossible position to defend. So let me unpack it like this. How can one know, in the technical sense of the word know, with like certainty, that God doesn't have a reason for allowing these things to happen? God could have one reason or two reasons or 17,083 reasons or a trillion reasons. And lots of philosophers have presented reasons throughout, especially the past 50 years in the philosophy of religion, literature. Some will say this is a result of the fallen world, or some will say that not all suffering is bad. Like, Andreas, you look like you go to the gym, on a leg day at the gym. That suffering's there. It's intrinsic to going to the gym and doing leg day, but that's not a bad thing. That has some positive utility to it. Or number 3, suffering is difficult, but experiencing it helps develop our character. It has this ability to teach us to be more loving and caring and compassionate and empathetic and forgiving and courageous and all of these sorts of things. You think of people like, you know, Harriet Tubman, for example, or Mother Teresa, William Wilberforce, Goku and Vegeta, if you like Dragon Ball Z, or other anime, you know, those sorts of reasons. And then lastly, there's something, another reason is something called skeptical theism. And that's an unhelpful sort of phrase. So skeptical theism isn't what it sounds like you're skeptical that like God exists or something like that. No, instead, what skeptical theism will try to advance is that there is like this gap in perspective and understanding between God and us, and that we just might not be able to bridge that gap. So you could think of it like Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you watched Lord of the Rings or read the books or watched Rings of Power, which I love all of them. But there's this gap in perspective and understanding of the big picture between, say, Frodo and J.R.R. Tolkien, or between Frodo and the reader. And skeptical theism would say that there's a similar sort of gap between human beings and God. And so God could have reasons, but we might just not be able to understand them or grasp them, given our finite minds and his infinite mind. So just a very quick caveat, and then we can go to the next question, which is, please hear me. I'm not saying that any of those reasons are why someone listening is suffering. I'm not saying that at all. However, what it does mean, these sorts of identifying the hidden assumptions, what it does mean is that it is logically possible for God and evil to coexist at the same time.